The lake was quiet that morning, its surface shimmering like glass beneath the pale sun, and inside my log cabin, the only sounds were the steady scratch of pens on paper and the low hum of serious conversation. Across the table sat the state attorney general, a woman whose presence carried both calm authority and undeniable weight. She had come all the way out to my secluded lake property for a private meeting about an important proposal, one that could secure environmental protections for the shoreline and ensure that the HOA's relentless attempts at control would finally be put to rest. We spoke in measured tones, reviewing maps, deeds, and legislation spread neatly across the oak table. Steam curled from mugs of fresh coffee, and the smell of pine from the crackling fire mixed with the scent of ink and paper. Everything about the setting was deliberate, private, official, and well within my rights. That serenity, however, shattered in an instant. Without warning, the cabin door burst open with a bang that rattled the window panes, and in stormed the one person I least wanted to see, HOA Karen. Her heels clicked sharply against the wooden floor as she barged in without knocking, her voice already raised before she even took in the room. "This is out of control," she shrieked, brandishing a clipboard as if it were a badge of law. "You can't just build docks, host meetings, and invite strangers here. This is HOA property, and you are trespassing." Her eyes burned with misplaced fury, and for a moment, she didn't even register the second person at the table. I leaned back slowly in my chair, letting her tirade bounce off the cabin walls, while the Attorney General's brows rose in quiet disbelief. Karen marched closer, slamming her clipboard down on top of our official documents, scattering papers across the table like confetti. Her face was red, her words spilling out in rapid-fire accusations about violations, unauthorized uses, and HOA fines she had supposedly approved. The Attorney General, calm as a stone, glanced at me and then back at Karen, her expression unreadable. Finally, with a small tilt of her head, she asked the one question that sliced through the chaos. "And you are?" The room fell silent for the first time since the door had flown open, but Karen was too self-righteous to notice the shift in tone. She puffed up, straightened her jacket, and replied in the kind of voice meant to intimidate, "I'm the HOA president, and I have full authority over this property. Everything here is under my control, and this man is in violation of our rules. Whoever you are, you're not supposed to be here either." The Attorney General's lips curved into a restrained, almost amused smile as she folded her hands neatly on the table. I didn't say a word, I didn't have to. Watching Karen dig her own grave was almost more satisfying than stopping her myself. She didn't realize it yet, but she had just stormed straight into the last place she should have been, the middle of an official state meeting. The Attorney General's pen came to a deliberate stop as she set it down on the table, the faint sound echoing louder than Karen's shrill ranting. With the kind of calm that only comes from true authority, she leaned back slightly in her chair, eyes fixed on the intruder who had barged into a space she had no claim over. "I'm the state attorney general," she said, her voice measured, clear, and heavy with significance. For the first time since storming in, Karen hesitated. A flash of doubt flickered across her face, but arrogance quickly smothered it as she attempted to regain ground. "Well, attorney general or not," she stammered, her tone wobbling but still sharp, "this man has violated HOA rules. He's altered the shoreline, he's constructed a dock without permission, and he's inviting outsiders into the community without clearance. Those are clear violations, and I won't stand for it." She jabbed her finger at me like I was a delinquent child caught sneaking candy, utterly oblivious to the absurdity of making demands in front of one of the highest-ranking legal officials in the state. The Attorney General slowly rose from her chair, her presence commanding every inch of the small cabin. Actually, she began, lifting a neatly folded document from the stack. "I was invited here, and what you've just interrupted is an official state-level meeting regarding environmental protection and property rights. Your HOA bylaws hold no jurisdiction over this land. This cabin and every inch of shoreline surrounding it is private property, deeded and recorded with the county clerk, which means you, madam, are the one trespassing." The words landed with the weight of a gavel, and Karen's face went pale, her confidence faltering like a candle in the wind. She tried to recover, waving her clipboard with renewed desperation. "No, you don't understand. The HOA has full authority in this community, and we decide what happens on the lake. If this land isn't regulated by us, it will become chaos. But the Attorney General cut her off with a voice sharp enough to slice through stone. "No, you don't understand. HOA authority stops at the edge of its own boundaries. You do not own this land. You do not control this cabin. And the very fact that you stormed in here interrupting state business could be classified as harassment and obstruction." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace. Karen's lips quivered as she searched for something, anything, that would restore the power she so clearly believed she had. But the Attorney General wasn't finished. She stepped forward, laying the deed flat on the table and tapping it with one manicured finger. "This is the legal authority here, not your clipboard, not your so-called fines. If you had done even a shred of due diligence, you'd know this property has always existed outside of HOA jurisdiction. You've overstepped in badly." Karen faltered, her bravado collapsing piece by piece, but still she muttered about filing complaints and issuing penalties, clinging to the last threads of her power. The Attorney General turned her gaze toward me with a faint smile before speaking again, this time directly to Karen. "If you persist in this, you won't just face civil consequences, you'll be dealing with my office, and believe me, we take attempted fraud and intimidation very seriously." Karen's jaw opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, her clipboard now a flimsy shield against the reality closing in on her. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small, her authority stripped bare in front of the very man she had tried to bully and the official she had just insulted. It was a moment I would never forget. The instant the mighty HOA, Karen realized she wasn't the law, and for once she wasn't in control. Karen's face was a mask of panic, but her pride kept her standing in the middle of my cabin like a cornered animal, muttering incoherently about bylaws and community authority, even as the Attorney General calmly pulled out her phone and placed a call to the county sheriff. The silence that followed was suffocating. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded, watching her confidence unravel like a loose thread on a cheap suit. She shifted her weight from one heel to the other, eyes darting toward the door as if calculating whether storming out would save her dignity. But by the time the sheriff's deputy pulled up 30 minutes later, that option was gone. His boots thudded heavily on the wooden porch as he entered, his uniform crisp, his expression all business. "Got a report of trespassing and obstruction of state business," he said, eyes sweeping the room. The Attorney General stepped forward, greeting him with the kind of familiarity that comes from years of professional respect. Karen tried to interject, waving her clipboard like a frantic flag. "Deputy, she doesn't understand. This is HOA property, and this man, he's a violator. He's ignoring fines. Her words died as the deputy lifted a hand, his voice firm. "Ma'am, I've looked over the property records on the way here. This cabin and land are privately owned, and they fall completely outside HOA jurisdiction. That means you've entered illegally and interfered with an official meeting." Karen's jaw slackened, but her stubbornness kicked in once more, her voice trembling with rage. "You can't do this to me. I am the HOA president. I have authority," but the Attorney General's voice sliced clean through her protest. "No, you abused authority you never had, and you just embarrassed your entire board in front of the state." The deputy nodded, stepping closer, his presence towering over Karen as he guided her clipboard down with one firm hand. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises immediately. Further resistance could result in charges, including harassment and obstruction." For the first time, Karen's bluster vanished completely, her shoulders slumping as the reality sank in. Behind her, the handful of HOA board members who had tagged along now stood awkwardly by the door, their eyes downcast, pretending they hadn't been complicit. One by one, they slipped out, murmuring excuses about misunderstandings and mistakes. Even the bravest of them didn't dare challenge the Attorney General's glare. Karen, however, was escorted to the door by the deputy, her protests shrinking into pitiful whispers as she realized the fight was over. When the door finally closed behind her, the cabin felt warmer, lighter, as though the storm had passed and left nothing but clarity in its wake. The Attorney General turned to me then, a rare smile tugging at her lips. "Well," she said dryly, "that was an impressive example of self-destruction. I don't think your HOA will be trying this again anytime soon." I laughed, shaking my head as I looked out the window toward the still waters of the lake, where the sun was beginning to set in a blaze of orange. The cabin, once threatened by false authority and relentless harassment, now stood as proof that truth and law held greater power than any clipboard or empty rule. That evening, I sat on the dock, the Attorney General's words still echoing in my mind, the ripples of the water catching the last light of day. Karen had stormed into my cabin, believing she could intimidate me, only to walk straight into the highest authority in the state. Her downfall was more than just a personal victory. It was a warning to every HOA bully who thought their titles made them untouchable. Out here, the lake was mine, the cabin was mine, and no self-appointed president could ever change that fact.